Welcome back. I'm John Gray of the Archdiocesan Department of Communications. We are honored to welcome the Archbishop of San Francisco, Salvatore Cordileone. A little bit about the Archbishop. He's a native of California, born in San Diego, but the son of natives of San Francisco. He was educated in the public schools in San Diego and was an avid musician in high school, playing in all the bands. In his freshman year of college, he began to discern a possible vocation to the priesthood. And entering the seminary, he pursued his studies in the Diocese of San Diego. He's a philosopher and a theologian and an expert in canon law, with a BA in philosophy, a master's in theology, and a doctorate in canon law. He was ordained a priest in 1982 and has done pastoral work in Southern California, in suburban parishes and at the Mexican border, and spent several years in Rome working at the Vatican. An auxiliary bishop in the Diocese of San Diego for several years, he was named Bishop of the Diocese of Oakland in 2009 and became Archbishop of San Francisco in 2013. Archbishop, thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, I wanted to ask you, we've just ended something called a Year of Mercy. It was initiated by Pope Francis. It's officially called, I believe, an Extraordinary Jubilee Year. Now, can you help us understand that? What is a Jubilee? Why is this one extraordinary? And what sort of year are we dealing with? It's not a calendar year. It's some other sort of year?
Yes.
Help us understand this whole
So there's a lot
structure.
to unpack in that long title, Extraordinary Jubilee Year of Mercy.
Indeed.
A Jubilee year, the Church celebrates every 25 years. It started way back in the year 1300 when many people were making pilgrimage to Rome at the end of the 13th century because of so much suffering that was caused by war and by plagues. And so they were flocking to Rome to pray at the sacred places there, to beg God forgiveness for their sins, understanding that our suffering in this world is a consequence of our rebellion against God. So the Pope at the time declared that there would be a Jubilee year dedicated to the forgiveness of sins. The idea of the Jubilee year is very biblical. It goes back to ancient Old Testament times, which is connected with the idea of Sabbath rest. So we're accustomed to the Sabbath every seventh day as a day of rest, a day dedicated to the Lord. In the biblical tradition of the ancient Jewish people, there was also a Sabbath year when even the land would be given a rest. So every Sabbath of Sabbaths, 7 times 7 years, every 50 years, there was a great jubilee that the people of God would celebrate, which was basically the idea of restitution. And so slaves were set free, people who lost property, the property was restored to them, debts were forgiven, families were reunited. So I like to kind of somewhat loosely call it the biblical bailout plan.
I see.
So, but it was a time of sort of restitution. So the Church recaptured this sense of Jubilee in the year 1300, and shortly after that, in the 15th century, it was established that every 25 years would be a Jubilee year dedicated to celebrating God's forgiveness of sins. And every once in a while, a Jubilee year is proclaimed by the Pope outside of this cycle of 25 years. That's why it's called an extraordinary Jubilee. Extraordinary in the sense of it's outside of the 25 years. So Pope Francis declared this year as an extraordinary Jubilee year dedicated to mercy, really building upon the theme of mercy begun especially with Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II now, whose pontificate was so dedicated to mercy. His second encyclical letter was dedicated to that theme. He gave us the now feast day of Divine Mercy on the second Sunday of Easter. So Pope Francis wanted to make the mercy of God available and to be a focal point of this year, which began December 8th of last year, 2015. Of course, December 8th is the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, when God in His mercy selected she who was to become the mother of His Son born into this world on that day of the Immaculate Conception, which was also the 50th anniversary of the conclusion of the Second Vatican Council,
I see.
Whose whole purpose was to make the Church, help the Church more effectively communicate the good news to the world today.
So this extraordinary Jubilee, it's not in the regular cycle of Jubilees, and the theme, a year of mercy, which we will get into. That is our theme for the day. Some extraordinary data on how this year just passed, which ended a couple of weeks ago, was received. According to the Vatican, some 800 million Catholics went through the holy doors that were set up throughout the world. Many pilgrims went to shrines. They claim 6 million hits on their website, the Vatican website, and so on. Apparently, it's been a very popular, very strong response from the Catholic laity. So I think we're going to look at the beginning of this year of mercy when the Pope opened the holy doors to begin the year. We have a brief video that we'll see that of the Pope in Rome. I'd like to play that now, and we'll discuss.
Questo anno straordinario è anche esso dono di grazia. Entrare per quella porta significa scoprire la profondità della misericordia del Padre che tutti accoglie e ad ognuno va incontro personalmente. È Lui chi ci cerca, è Lui chi ci viene incontro. Sarà un anno in cui crescere nella convinzione della misericordia.
So the Pope says, we're seeking encounter with God because He seeks encounter with us. And this will be a year in which we grow ever more convinced of God's mercy. And these holy doors through which we've all walked during this year are a rare event, you said, something you might see only 2 or 3 times in your life. When we come back in our next segment, we'll discuss the doors of mercy and what they mean, and the metaphorical significance of doors and gateways and entries and pathways in our faith and Scripture with the Archbishop.